Hello there, I'm that Metroid guy, and I have something I need to talk about before we cover Quadraxis or anything else Metroid. There's no seamless way to transition it, so Sonic 3. This film is everything to me, and I need to talk about it, and there are absolutely going to be spoilers in this video, and it's kinda gonna be all over the place, so that's your warning. This one's for me. I'm going to take this entire video to ramble to you about Sonic in general as if you have any idea what I'm talking about, and hopefully you'll get why I had to make a video about this. Before we get into it, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I usually cover Metroid here, and with Metroid Prime 4 coming sometime this year, now is as good of a time to do so. But for now, a little bit of my history with Sonic. I grew up with Sonic in the 2000s and experienced Sonic media throughout my life, be it the games, cartoons, and even fan creations on Newgrounds, YouTube, and DeviantArt. Sprite battles, animations, parodies, you name it. Sonic was my shit during my childhood, and the game that started it all was probably the one that did the same thing for a lot of others at the time. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Sure, I didn't have the Dreamcast original, but honestly, I'm glad I didn't because this is the exact version that changed the course of my life. I played it on the GameCube religiously, alone or with my brothers, and that soundtrack is burned into my mind and will follow me forever. I did play Sonic Adventure, Heroes, and Shadow as well, don't get me wrong, and funnily enough, I didn't click with the 2D classics and still kinda struggle with them now, but Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is one of the core pillars of my childhood. I would hum Live and Learn in the school halls while waiting for lessons to start, I would play Flash games to Radical Highway and it would make the experience several times more intense, and I would listen to City Escape on the in-game sound test mode repeatedly and let it run for ages at a time before I was able to access a computer. Sonic himself was my childhood hero, and Shadow's sacrifice at the end of the game has stuck with me even until now. This game undoubtedly shaped me and my tastes in media in general. I love the music, the character dynamics, the colors, the gameplay, and so much more. But then I kinda had a slump with Sonic for a while. For many, including myself, Sonic was kinda lost from 2006 onwards. The games were lacking, all over the place, and to me personally, the gameplay was just not what I found fun. The overly snappy and momentum-based high-speed platforming gameplay I fell in love with was gone in favor of a more on-rails boost-to-win formula that I just didn't enjoy. Not for lack of trying, I found colors to play awfully and Unleashed, while the day levels were refined and okay, the dark levels were just a drag and tedious. But that's not even mentioning the lowest of lows. I never even touched Sonic 06, but I am curious now. I thought I beat Black Knight within the first hour of play with its fake-out ending, and it left a sour taste in my mouth, and the dead horse that is Sonic Boom. But that's not to say there was nothing good. Sonic Generations was the glue that held my love for Sonic during that time, and I'm glad that was the game that did it. It celebrated Sonic's history up until 2011, from the classic checkered grounds of Green Hill to the skyscrapers of Speed Highway and beyond. It was by far the most enjoyable version of the boost formula to me. The controls were responsive, there was a bit of platforming this time around, and the music was incredible as usual. There was also the 3DS version of the game that I loved too, with its unique stages and understandably downgraded mechanics and gameplay. It was still a lot of fun to play a game like this on the go. It's a similar story for Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed, but in reverse. I played the 3DS version from its release and then the PC version within the last 5 years, but they play almost identically. Sure, it's a racing game, but it's one of the best playing racing games to me. It stands up there with F-Zero GX. It's that good. These games were enough to have Sonic in my mind, but the love I had for it when I was playing Adventure 2 was definitely not there, and with the release of Sonic Forces, I was just about ready to give up entirely as I'd paid attention to its marketing and got let down tremendously, except for one little piece of it. Episode Shadow caught my attention and made this part of Forces actually enjoyable. It tapped into that early to mid 2000s era with its structure, music, and overall vibe. It was scratching a particular itch that hadn't been done since Sonic Generations, but was doing it in a way that hadn't been done since Shadow's own game. It was enough to make me hold on. There was also the first Sonic film that was released, and while its first impression is also a dead horse, I watched it and was pleasantly surprised. I had an amazing time with the film, and this only worked because of Sonic's redesign, and he was immediately lovable, and the film was just fun. I was sad that barely any music from the game showed up, but given what happened with the film, I forgave that. It was still not enough to make me fully reconnect with Sonic though. It was another patch of glue, all things considered. But then Sonic Frontiers came out. This game. Oh, this game. This was the one that brought my love for Sonic flooding back in the first hour. The first boss made me cry with joy and it... God damn it. The first boss made me cry with joy and it brought me right back to the final hazard fight from Sonic Adventure 2. In that moment, another pillar of my life formed and it's one I will remember forever. The feeling, the gameplay, the power of Super Sonic and the music. Oh my god, the music. Sonic Frontiers is quite the departure from the usual Sonic formula. It keeps the boost gameplay but has adjusted the mechanics to take platforming and momentum more into consideration. But the biggest thing is that it's primarily an open world game that has shorter levels that cares more about speed and performance, and the first few were surprisingly difficult. 1-2 my beloved. Despite the more recent negative views on Frontiers by a lot of people for some reason, I had an incredible time with this game. It did feel a little dragged out later on, but the bosses, the gameplay, and the voice direction are things that I think about very regularly. I love this deeper, more serious tone to Sonic. It felt like a progression of Sonic's character from Adventure 2, where despite his usual quips and silliness, when things get serious, so does he, and that means a lot to me. And this is where the first teaser for the third Sonic film comes in. From this alone, I had hope for the film because the motif of Live and Learn played. Talking about it now gives me chills. Sure, there wasn't a guarantee it would be in the film, but considering the previous two films seemed to be incredibly reluctant to put music from the games into them, and yet here's the teaser for the next one doing it loud and proud, while recreating the logo of one of my favourite games of all time. You could say I had a lot of optimism. Then for a while, it was quiet. I'd played Frontiers, seen the two Sonic films, and a teaser for the third one was out. What could possibly keep me interested while I wait for them? When Sega announced the Year of Shadow, I don't think anyone, myself included, expected anything like Shadow Generations. A remaster of the original Sonic Generations with a whole extra game on top? Yeah, sign me up. And the trailers, the visuals, the music, oh my god!
The promised time will arrive once more.
From the trailers and prologue, I was instantly hooked. It felt like Sonic Team were finally carrying on from the games of the early to mid 2000s in terms of narrative, character, and overall presentation. They acknowledged the shattered moon for the first time since it happened in Adventure 2. I was in genuine disbelief. And then I actually played the game, and yeah, it's peak. The first level is a remake of Sonic's last level in Adventure 2 with a remix to complete, on top of various visits to Radical Highway. There was so much of Adventure 2, Heroes, and Shadow's titular game in this. Even Sonic 06 was acknowledged in good taste. It took me a long while to accept the current Shadow voice actor as a true Shadow, if that makes sense. But with this game, he definitely became one for me. Shadow felt like he finally became who he was meant to be, and it took a visit from an old friend and longtime foes to bring him back. It felt like Sonic was back on track to me at this point, but there was a worry that it was too good to be true. Oh, wait, that's a trailer for Sonic 3 just put out randomly? I hope it's good.
Hey, no cheat code! My turn.
Oh my god. I'm going to skip to now, where I've actually seen the film. So why have I been constantly mentioning Sonic Adventure 2 specifically? Well, Sonic 3 is essentially a film adaptation of that game, and damn does it show, and by god does it have me hook, line, and sinker. Of course, it does take its own liberties in the sense that it needs to make sense within the story of the other Sonic films, which are great on their own by the way, but this film is where the source material is more explicitly used, and I couldn't be happier. The story, the settings, the music, and the overall vibe brings me back to Sonic Adventure 2, and with a fresh new look, and even some of the same, namely with Shadow. Needless to say, Shadow's backstory is more or less identical, but there are some changes here and there. Arriving to Earth in a Black Arms-like meteor, he and Maria bonding in an underground lab rather than in space aboard the Ark, and even having Gerald himself be alive and free Shadow rather than Eggman. It feels a lot more natural than the likes of Sonic Adventure 2, where, while Shadow is fueled by revenge in both, Gerald being the one to keep Shadow on that path as opposed to Eggman makes a whole lot more sense given he trusts Gerald. Not to say the original version is bad, the two depictions are vastly different and have different intentions behind the characters. Shadow's need for revenge in Adventure 2 came primarily from within and is portrayed as a villain until the end, while the film gives Shadow a want for revenge, justice, and answers, and anytime he starts to question things, he is roped back in by someone else. Even in the beginning of the film, he wasn't the one to initiate the fight with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. He only fought those associated with Gun, understandably so. Even when the trio jumped out of a gun helicopter, Shadow still wanted to avoid an unnecessary fight. Then when Knuckles starts the fight, that's when there's no going back. And to Sonic's credit, The second that Shadow dropped the info that something was off about Gunn, he too wanted answers and wanted nothing to do with them. Shadow gets a decent amount of solo screen time to weigh in on his emotions. It's honestly refreshing for these films, and he's the most appropriate to get this sort of attention. I almost forgot to mention that Keanu Reeves' performance for Shadow is incredibly fitting. While I would have liked to have heard him say more of Shadow's more notable dialogue like Chaos Control or even Ultimate Lifeform, how he delivers Shadow's dialogue with Maria, down to the way he says her name, immediately allowed me to believe that this is indeed the Shadow I know. That said, Shadow is more misguided and dynamic through the film. Then, after becoming a bit more like his villainous depiction in the game, thanks to Gerald, he's knocked down and brought back to reality by Sonic and his own words to Maria. Much like in the game, Shadow is by far the most interesting character, and while his story is a bit more on the simpler side, it's definitely effective and hasn't lost its touch in the 25 years that the Ultimate Lifeform has been around. There was one thing that was missing. Radical Highway. Come on, with how much it was in Shadow Generations, it would have been appropriate to put Shadow's first and most iconic stage into this film somewhere. It's up there with Green Hill Zone. But I do appreciate Live and Learn being Shadow's leitmotif throughout the film. To talk about the film more generally, I appreciate the significantly greater focus on the characters that actually matter. The Sonic characters, the ones we're actually there to see. Sonic himself starts off very aloof, the usual for this depiction in particular, but he can get serious and even threatening when he needs to be. When Tom gets injured, he doesn't make another goofy joke for the rest of the film and becomes a lot like his Adventure 2 counterpart once he gets over his want for revenge. Tails is a bit more in the background compared to the second film and is definitely much more of a supportive character. He serves his purpose well, but he is definitely a bit overshadowed and generally doesn't do too much that couldn't have been written another way to make him stand out a bit more, which is kind of a shame. Knuckles, however, continues to be the stoic yet pumped character I know him to be. He isn't treated like an idiot and he sticks to his beliefs. Even when Sonic is threatening to fight him again, Knuckles backs down because he trusts Sonic and honors his rules, even if Sonic breaks his own ones. As I won't really get a more appropriate time to mention it, the lack of rouge is felt here. Sonic and Tails have their dark side rivals, but the Batgirl is nowhere to be seen or even inferred. I can kind of understand why given her appearance, but with Rouge having a semi-resurgence alongside Shadow lately, and given that Adventure 2 is Rouge's debut title as well, it would have been nice to see the film bring Rouge over, especially considered she is tied to Gunn and uncovering Shadow's history. Her role is largely replaced by Agent Stone, who is an amazing character in himself, but it would have been cool to see some conflict between Rouge and Stone, and have her be the one to accidentally drop what Gerald and Shadow are planning for the benefit of Gunn. Honestly, if she wasn't going to appear here, then I doubt she's going to ever appear at all. Oh, Jim Carrey, how you shine in this film. His Dr. Eggman has been an absolute delight to watch throughout the films, going from a relatively generic kids villain played by Jim Carrey to Dr. Eggman played by Jim Carrey. At first I wasn't quite sure if it would work, considering the Eggman I liked was the conniving, gun-pointing, and borderline scary depiction in Sonic Adventure 2, and while this Eggman is far from that, this one is very much its own while still being true to Eggman's overall character, and it's large part down to Carrey himself. Eggman even becomes the temporary ally he did in Adventure 2. Sure, it gets a little silly when both Robotniks dance in the middle of Gun HQ, but it was genuinely amazing to watch, and the song cannot get out of my head. Gerald also has a significantly more comedic twist, but the intentions and hatred of the original character still shine through, culminating in his total betrayal and abandonment of Eggman and twisting Maria's wishes that sent Shadow berserk, and Eggman switching sides. The fight between Gerald and Eggman was a little much in places for my taste in a few spots though. Some parts of it felt pretty forced and didn't play to the unique traits of the characters. But that's not the fight that anyone really cares about. Sonic vs. Shadow, the fight that this entire film has been building towards, much like the game. This time with a bit more of a revenge twist on Sonic's side. Once again becoming Super Sonic, he darts off and targets Shadow specifically. Despite being able to take out the Ark right then and there, his need to get payback blinded him and Shadow fully exploits that in the fight. He then pulls a Knuckles and punches the Chaos Emeralds right out of Sonic, and then they both charge for them. They both turn super, with Shadow being given a look more akin to his beta super form. And then the fight ensues, with Shadow getting an early upper hand. A more menacing motif of Live and Learn plays throughout the film, but in this fight it brings in those classic guitars with a more dramatic twist as Shadow gets going. But Sonic isn't going down without a fight, of course. He catches Shadow's punch and then launches him by pushing against the mountain they were on top of, shifting the entire tectonic plate beneath them and spewing lava. Now these are true depictions of super forms. Spin kicking, punching like it's Dragon Ball. This was like watching Mario Bros. Z on the big screen with how this fight was choreographed, flying around and getting punched miles away at insane speeds. Watching this in the cinema felt incredible. I could feel every hit, every movement, and then having the seats move along with the action when I watched it a second time made it that much more impactful. Yeah, I saw this film twice in the cinema. I haven't done that with any other film, not even Sonic 2. Shadow then manages to knock Sonic down and mock him for abandoning Tails, Knuckles, his family and friends, just to fight Shadow. This obviously enrages Sonic and he punches Shadow all the way to the moon, where he's knocked out of his super form. Sonic catches him and Shadow tells him to finish him. And this is where the turn of Shadow's character starts. Only this time it's on Sonic to do it rather than Amy. Sonic collects himself, remembering what Tom said to him way earlier in the film, and allowing Shadow to remember his time with Maria under the stars. Sonic still feels the pain of Longclaw's loss, but the love is still there. With that and the rising sun around the Earth, Shadow finally turns and accepts that this whole thing was his fault, having felt only pain for 50 years left him blind. Then Sonic helps him up and Live and Learn fully blasts through the film as they turn super with the iconic clap of the hands. Classic guitars and even the exact same vocals as in the original game as Sonic and Shadow blast up towards the Ark, aiming to save the world, fighting through a field of gun robots to an instrumental of Live and Learn, and striking that all too iconic pose. Experiencing this for the first time in the cinema, hearing and seeing my childhood on the big screen 20 years in the making, I cannot describe how overwhelmed I was with joy. I cried repeatedly during and after and watching the film, and even as I write and say this. Solely because of this moment, it would not have hit as hard if the film in its entirety wasn't good, or if I didn't have my history with Sonic. It's the fact that the film was great from beginning to end that this build up from my childhood to now landed as hard as it did. Playing the 2D classic Sonic games, and not really clicking with them. Playing Sonic Adventure and Battle, playing Shadow, playing Heroes, Sonic and Shadow Generations, and Frontiers, culminating in all of that history being respected in the best way possible. Sure, I'm kind of being dramatic, but hopefully you get why this moment, this film, deserved a video all on its own. This is truly what made me realize just how important Sonic has been to my life. And we're not even done with the film yet. The Ark fires, and the two Super Hedgehogs do what they can to hold the beam off, and this is also where Sonic says his first proper quip in a long while, and in a way that I can absolutely hear it be said in Sonic Adventure 2. Then the Ark is redirected towards the moon, and a whole piece of it gets destroyed, like in the game. Reference: Eggman in his usual ways takes all the credit, but the Ark is then revealed to be set to explode and cause nuclear fallout on the Earth. Sonic had passed out and lost his super form because of the Ark's beam, and fell to Earth with Tails and Knuckles. Shadow then takes off his inhibitor rings, which is something that's not been highlighted since Sonic 06, but is now also mentioned in Shadow Generations 2. He then pushes the Ark away from Earth before it explodes, killing him and Dr. Eggman in the process, but not before the latter says goodbye to Stone. Okay, we learn in the second post-credit scene, yes there are two, that Shadow indeed lives, like in the games. He picks his rings up off the ground on Earth, and the film ends. But I want to talk about the first one. Sonic gets lost in the woods during the race at the end of the film, and encounters Metal Sonic, who is one-to-one with his game counterpart, along with many other, clearly inferior versions given their lack of Metal's usual colors. Then a hammer that seemingly only one girl can wield breaks a bunch of them, and using the cracked open moon as a backdrop, Amy Rose makes her appearance at last. I couldn't help but punch the air in joy when I saw her. She's one of my favorites in the franchise, and man, she looks amazing. No doubt tying into the next film, which is likely based on Sonic CD, and I'm all here for it. I admit I won't have that high of expectations as I'm not that attached to Sonic CD specifically, but I hope it's a great film at the very least. What a film. This is one I'm going to get physically, and shortly after I saw this, I went and bought the other two films as well. This is an experience I'm going to remember and get emotional over for a long, long while. And I'm so happy with Sonic 3, and I'm happy that my childhood game got the respect it deserved. Okay, you've heard me monologue at you about Sonic for a while now, but I did say I'd branch out from Metroid here and there. Don't worry, next time we'll be back to Metroid, and I will be covering the Olympic cluster at long last. Then, whether Samus is a friend of the Federation or not, and after, we're going to talk about Quadraxis. And who knows, I might throw in a stream or two between them. Sound like a plan? Alright, awesome. So until then, I will see you on the next mission. Bye bye.